Welcome back everyone to GCSE Religious Studies. In this lesson we are going to examine further practices relating to the religion of Christianity, and we're going to be looking at Christian celebrations in this lesson. Now this is actually going to be a lesson that people who are either familiar with Christianity or who live in the United Kingdom should have quite a lot of familiarity with, because these are celebrations that in some instances, despite the fact that a lot of people in the UK are not Christian, they will celebrate these particular celebrations. So for example, Christmas, which is one that we're going to be looking at in this lesson. So we're going to discuss the process and describe what these celebrations are, but the thing that's most important for your studies is to have a detailed understanding of the role and importance of these celebrations to Christians. What do they actually signify? What are the importance, and how can we link these Christian celebrations to the various doctrinal practices that exist within Christianity? We'll explain and explore each of the different Christian celebrations, and then we will explain, like I said, the role and importance of them. And we're going to begin with everyone's favourite, which is that of Christmas. Now, we're going to begin talking about Christmas because there are a number of different instances of events that take place leading up to and on and around the time of Christmas. And the first of these is known as Advent, and this is the period of time that takes place before Christmas. And it is considered to be part of the celebrations around the time of Christmas more generally, the Advent period. And what it does is it begins on the fourth Sunday before Christmas Day. So we see the build-up to that particular celebration. The word itself refers to the period of time awaiting for the arrival of some particular thing. Now, the arrival of this particular thing is, of course, Christ, because that is when Christ is born on Christmas Day. And so, therefore, Advent is the period of time that is the build-up to that particular event, waiting for that particular thing to take place. And Advent itself marks the period of waiting for celebrations around the birth of Jesus and as well as the second coming of Christ himself. And it is also the start of the liturgical church year for both the Roman Catholic Church as well as Anglican churches. So it has significance not only in terms of the relevance to Christmas itself, but it also has significance relating to the calendar year for particular church denominations, specifically Catholicism and Anglican church practices. So we have the period of Advent that leads up to the day of Christmas, and then we have Christmas itself, Christmas Day. Now, this is the day that celebrates the birth of Christ, birth of Jesus. And on Christmas Day, churches will hold services which will involve the singing of hymns relating to the birth of Jesus. Now, hymns that are specifically sung around the time of Christmas and are related specifically to the birth of Jesus have a special name. They're known as carols or Christmas carols, and they also have readings from the Bible, and we also have reenactments of the birth of Christ, which is known as the Nativity. For the most part, Christians will celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December of each year. However, things can be different depending on the denomination in which you are celebrating Christmas from. So, for example, within Orthodox Christianity, Christmas falls on the day that is believed that the Magi actually visited Jesus, and this is actually not on Christmas Day. This is on the 7th of January. This day falls. So, despite the fact that it is in and around the same time, in and around the kind of months towards the end of the year, as we go from December to January, Christian denominations will have different times in which they celebrate different parts of Christmas. We also have a period of fasting that takes place within Orthodox Christianity as well. So not only are the times in which the celebrations take place slightly different depending on the denomination that we are talking about, but there's also differences in terms of individual practices within each of these celebrations. So within Orthodox Christianity, there is a period of fasting that takes place in and around the time of Christmas. Now, arguably the most significant religious celebration, the one that it has the most religious significance, is that of Easter. And this is because it signifies and deals with the celebrations around the crucifixion and the resurrection of Christ. Arguably the most important historical or religious event that takes place within Christianity. So it is arguably the most holy period of the year, and this will take place at the end of what is known as Holy Week. Now, it centers around the suffering, crucifixion, and resurrection of Christ. And before the Easter celebrations, we have the period known as Lent. This is a 40 days period that takes place before the Easter period. So it really is quite a long period of time that we celebrate different celebrations around Easter time. It's recognized in the Orthodox Church, the Roman Catholic Church, as well as the Church of England. And Lent today is usually a time of fasting. Now, when we say fasting, we don't necessarily refer to not eating for 40 days, because that would be quite a stretch. In reality, more colloquially, people during Lent will spend time, and they tend to try and limit a particular consumption of a certain either unethical or unholy particular consumption. So some people might say they're giving up chocolate for Lent, or they might give up alcohol for Lent, etc., etc. And the idea being that you are fasting some kind of particular consumption that you enjoy. And for the most part, people will say that they're giving up things for Lent, but then often don't. So we have a situation here where not everybody is as diligent in their fasting during Lent as you might think. However, a lot of Christians do actually give up a particular thing for Lent, and they actually stick to it for the full 40 days. Then we have another part of the Easter celebration, which is that of Ash Wednesday. And this is to mark the start of Lent. Many churches and congregations will have special Eucharist services, and this is done on Ash Wednesday. It's called Ash Wednesday because Christians will make a sign of a cross on their forehead in ash. So, as the name suggests, that's why it's called Ash Wednesday. And what this does is it represents both the suffering and the death of Christ that we see leading up to the crucifixion and then the subsequent resurrection. The start of the Holy Week around Easter is known as Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday is the Sunday that takes place before the Easter weekend, and it represents the time when Jesus returned to Jerusalem and was welcomed by people waving palm branches, and they placed the palm branches down. So you can see all of these different holy days that have a certain amount of religious significance relate to the story that takes place when it comes to the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. And so, as such, we have all of these different different parts of the celebration, and it takes place over a long period of time. Now, there are also people chanting "Save Now" when we have the Palm Sunday, or at least what happens on Palm Sunday, at least what Palm Sunday represented. Then we have Maundy Thursday, which is a word that relates to the Latin mundatum, and it means commandment. So this is a day and refers to a time when Jesus had supper with his disciples, the Last Supper. Now, the Last Supper is what we have during this period, just before the capture and the crucifixion of Christ. He has his Last Supper with his disciples. He washes their feet. We have the very famous representation of his body and his blood, and we also have the famous revelation that Jesus presents, whereby he suggests that one of his disciples will betray him. Of course, we know this being Judas. During this time, Christians will celebrate by washing people's feet. You can see how we take the biblical stories that we have, we take the significance and the meaning of the biblical stories, we take the actions of Jesus, and we try to mirror them when we do the Christian celebration. So we try to represent our mirroring of these different Christian celebrations by doing essentially what Jesus had done. So people will have a supper on Maundy Thursday, and they will also celebrate by washing people's feet in the same way as Jesus had. Good Friday is where we remember the crucifixion of Christ itself, the actual event that takes place. This is done on Good Friday. The death of Jesus is obviously the greatest act of martyrdom for the Christian cause and for Christianity more broadly. And it also represents the greatest act of mercy because he sacrificed himself for the sins of humanity. So we can understand why this is such a holy period of time for many Christians around the world, because of all of this significance and all of this meaning that is represented in all of these acts. And then finally, we have the actual final event that takes place within the Easter church, within the Christian calendar on Easter, which is that of Easter Sunday, or Saturday and Sunday. We could really expand this to Easter weekend. And this is the time of celebrations where Jesus is resurrected and the sins of mankind are forgiven, the final part of the story. And during this time, many Christian groups will keep an Easter vigil on the Saturday evening. And this is known. This is a candle that is used, that is known as a Paschal candle. And essentially, what happens is they will drop 5 drops of incense on it, and each of these drops will represent the 5 wounds that Christ received on the cross. And the candle is then used to light all the other candles in which the rest of the congregation will hold during the Eucharist. Again, all of this having quite a lot of religious significance, religious meaning, a lot of representation in terms of the mirroring of acts that takes place. You are mirroring the acts that take place to Christ in the story, in the biblical texts, and you are doing that by making practices that represent those particular acts. So the candle itself is representing the 5 wounds of Christ as each of the drops of incense are dropped onto it. We have all these other things taking place. And so this is the main bulk of the celebrations that we see within Christianity. Now, there are others that we will go into in extra lessons if we have to, but for the most part, we have the Christmas celebrations, and then we also have the Easter celebrations. Of course, if we're going to signify which of the two are most holy of these two celebrations, we would argue that Easter is arguably the most holy period within the Christian calendar.